Imagine a world that is, by every single metric, an absolute paradise. I mean, a place where the rivers literally never end.
Right.
Valleys that shimmer like living mirrors because the water is just so pure, and the air smells like fresh rain permanently.
Like a vacation brochure for the afterlife, basically.
Exactly. It sounds perfect, right? But here is the catch, and it is a terrifying one. This paradise is home to a species that is generally peaceful right up until the moment they feel even remotely threatened. And then they hit what the datasheet calls aggression level 10.
Which, to be clear, is the ceiling. You literally cannot go higher than 10 on this scale.
Right, we're talking about a people willing to commit total planetary genocide to protect their way of life. It's a utopia with a hair trigger for the apocalypse.
It is a fascinating contradiction, isn't it? And it really is the centerpiece of what we are covering today.
So welcome back to the Deep Dive. I am your host, and today we have a dual mission, and it's a big one. We are cracking open the NeoMercy Clan universe.
Glad to be here to unpack this with you.
Now, usually when we talk about a universe in fiction or media, we mean a setting. You know, here are the stars and here are the planets. But the source material here describes something completely different. It describes a story engine.
Right. It is framed less as a static map and more as a repeatable framework. Or a machine, really.
So we need to unpack that massive framework first, which apparently covers over 100 worlds. And then we're going to zoom all the way into one specific place, Planet ID 104, a world called Evervale.
And that is where the cold, hard systems and the statistics we see in the macro documentation collide with a very human, or rather, a very Valesino tragedy.
Yeah.
We're going to look at the origin story of a character known simply as Prince and examine how geography, magic, and politics created a disaster that literally rippled across dimensions.
I have been reading through the narrative arc titled The Lost Heir of Evervale, and honestly, on the surface, it reads like high fantasy drama at its best. You have kings and betrayals and magical water. It is intense.
Yeah, it really is.
But you keep pointing me back to this concept of the engine. Before we get to the sword and sorcery stuff, help us understand the box this all comes in. What does the source material actually mean by repeatable engine?
So this is the key insight that separates this from just being a collection of random sci-fi stories. The NeoMercy Clan universe isn't just a timeline, it's a simulation of sorts. The materials describe a strict logic chain that governs creation.
Okay.
Starts with the physical world. The fundamental rule of this engine is worlds shape species.
Okay, so biology is entirely downstream from geography.
Exactly. And then the next link is species shape society. And finally, society shapes technology. It sounds simple on paper, but it is a rigid causal link. You can't just skip a step.
So instead of just saying, hey, here's a cool alien with a laser gun, the engine demands you ask, what kind of planet did they grow up on that forced them to invent that specific gun?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Let's apply that logic to a hypothetical scenario to see how the engine works. If a planet is a frozen wasteland with high gravity, the species must evolve to survive the cold and the crushing weight.
Right, so they'd be built like tanks.
Yeah, they might be short, stocky, and covered in thick fur. That means their society will likely value heat or shelter above all else. Their currency might literally be BTUs or insulation units, and so their technology will be built entirely around thermal regulation.
Right, whereas a species living on a gas giant would have a completely different concept of value or territory.
Correct. And that brings us to how conflict works in this universe. The conflict doesn't usually come from a dark lord who is just evil for the sake of being evil. The source material specifies that conflict arises from resource scarcity, trade disputes, territory, and ideology.
It's essentially a geopolitical simulator in space.
It is designed to be exactly that. It is a sandbox with strict physics, and the scope is massive. You have 100 primary worlds designated planet IDs 1 through 100.
Wow.
But then there's this special set called the Earthline set, which are IDs 101 through 110.
And sitting on top of all of this, the absolute top of the hierarchy are entities known as the Nine. Now, the Nine sounds ominous. Are these gods or are they programmers?
The text is deliberately vague on that point, but it describes them as omnipotent entities. They are the arbiters of reality and consequence. So while the mortals are down on the planets fighting over trade routes and resources, the Nine are watching.
Just observing.
Perhaps guiding, perhaps judging. They are the absolute highest power level in this cosmic hierarchy.
Which is a perfect segue, actually, because the story we are analyzing today bridges that exact gap. It goes from the mud, or I guess the water, of a single planet all the way up to those cosmic powers. So let's leave the galaxy map behind and splash down on Planet ID 104. Welcome to Evervale, also known as Earth 04.
Located in the Hydrovia Nebula cluster.
The visuals here, for anyone listening, are just stunning. The source material describes it as a world of rivers that never ended, valleys that shimmer. It is a wet world, but not like a dank swamp. It is clean and flowing and vital.
It's pristine.
Yeah, and living there are the Valesinos. Now, based on the notes, if I bumped into a Valesino at a coffee shop, I wouldn't run screaming, right?
No, you wouldn't necessarily even know you were talking to someone from an alien planet. They are completely humanoid. They look like Earthlings.
Okay.
They aren't amphibious. They don't have scales. They aren't reptiles or beings made of pure energy. They look like us. The main biological difference is their longevity. They live an average of 200 Earth years.
So they look like us, they live a lot longer, and they live in a water paradise. But here is where it gets really complicated. I mentioned this in the intro earlier, the aggression level.
Yes, the famous metric.
The datasheet lists their aggression level at a 10. How do you reconcile a paradise with a 10 on the violence scale? That honestly feels like a glitch in the profile.
This is the aha moment for this entire species profile. The notes explicitly state that Valesinos are typically very peaceful. They aren't conquerors by nature. They don't go out looking for fights or trying to expand a galactic empire.
Right.
But the text says they have no reservations about destroying entire planets or committing genocide if they feel their way of life is threatened.
That is such a sharp turn. It disrupts the whole noble savage trope or the peaceful elf trope immediately.
It really does.
Think about it. It is like finding out your friendly neighbor who gardens on weekends has a nuclear launch code and is perfectly willing to use it if you step on his petunias.
That's a great way to put it. It frames them as defensive zealots. It suggests a society that values its own preservation above absolutely everything else in the universe. Peace at any cost, but interpreted in the most violent way possible.
Yeah.
And that extreme dichotomy, having great beauty and peace masking terrifying power, is crucial to understanding the tragedy of the royal family.
So let's get into that tragedy. This is the narrative arc titled The Lost Heir of Evervale. We are introduced first to the royal family. The king and queen are known as Aguasabayos,
Which loosely translates to something like water-wise,
Mm-hmm.
but the implication in the text is much deeper than just being smart about water. It implies a mastery of the element itself. The text says they carry the life force of water.
And on Evervale, water isn't just a utility. It is not just something you drink or bathe in. The Valesinos, and specifically the royals, bond with it. They literally command the essence of it.
Right, it responds to them.
Storms, tides, life force, it is all under their control. And at the start of our story, they have just had a baby. The prince.
The protagonist of this whole arc, born with the mark of the waters. His cradle is a basin of living springs. The priests are already predicting that his voice alone could command oceans.
No pressure on the kid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He is the embodiment of that potential power we talked about. He is the heir to the aggression level 10 capability, but currently he's just an innocent infant.
But every good story needs a villain, and lurking in the shadows of the throne room is the prince's uncle. And this, man, talk about a chip on your shoulder. What drives him? Is he just the generic evil brother who wants the throne?
It is actually much more interesting than that. It goes right back to the world-shaped society rule of the engine. On Evervale, your social standing, political power, and religious authority are all dictated by your biological bond to water. And the uncle was born without the gift. He was born deaf to the element.
That is brutal. So he is the brother of the king. He's technically royalty, but he is completely locked out of the system that gives that title any meaning.
Exactly. He is effectively a glitch in their social matrix. The source text says, in that denial grew envy. He viewed the prince's inheritance as a cruel injustice.
I can see how he'd get there.
He believed power belonged to those strong enough to seize it, not just those lucky enough to be born into it. So since he couldn't use the natural magic of the planet, he turned to something else. He found a forbidden strength.
A crystal shard. Now, in the context of the story engine we talked about earlier, this shard feels like a total anomaly. It doesn't fit the natural order of Evervale at all.
No, it doesn't. It acts almost like a virus or a hack in a computer system. It wasn't a natural part of their water magic. It was something that actively twisted the river's flow. It is described multiple times as unnatural.
So a complete contrast to the royals.
Yes, so you have the natural flowing power of the king and queen, which perfectly aligns with the planet's ecosystem, and the jagged, forced, artificial power of the uncle.
And eventually the dam breaks. We get to Act 2, the Night of Blood and Water, the scene setting here is incredibly cinematic.
The timing is highly significant, too. The attack happens under a moonless sky at still time.
Oh, wow.
The uncle strikes when the natural influence of the celestial bodies on the water is at its absolute weakest. He knows the mechanics of the magic better than anyone because he has spent his entire life studying how to break it.
He breaches the lagoon towers with soldiers and fire and steel. And the king and queen, this is the part that really got me. They don't just hide. They meet him in the throne chamber.
They stand their ground.
And they don't fight with swords. They fight with the architecture of the room itself. The rivers rise like serpents.
It paints such a vivid picture of their connection to the planet. They are described as fighting not just as monarchs defending a crown, but as guardians of a sacred covenant. But this is where the system of the story engine comes into play again.
Right.
The uncle isn't just using brute force. He is using that crystal shard to corrupt the very weapon the king and queen rely on.
Yeah, the text says, the shard twisted currents and unraveled storms. It turned the water against its masters. It is horrifying to imagine, honestly, your own element, the thing that completely defines your existence, suddenly trying to kill you.
And despite their immense power, remember, these are beings who can shape massive storms. They are overwhelmed. The corruption defies them. The king falls. The queen is staggering. The throne chamber is just flooded with crimson.
And this is the moment where most people would surrender or, scream for revenge. If I am the king and I have one breath left, I am using it to curse the guy who just killed me.
Naturally.
But the king and queen do something completely unexpected. They pray. But they don't pray to a local god or a water spirit. They call out to someone or something much bigger.
They call to Khaeos.
Now, who or what is Khaeos? Because this name hasn't popped up in any of the planetary data we've discussed so far.
The description is cryptic, but extremely powerful. He is described as everywhere and nowhere, a presence both terrifying and serene. If we connect this back to the NeoMercy framework we discussed earlier, it is highly probable that Khaeos is directly connected to the Nine.
So he is an admin? Or part of the cosmic IT department?
In a way, yes.
Right.
Or perhaps an agent of the admins. He operates on that highest cosmic level of the hierarchy. He is an entity that exists entirely outside the normal rules of the universe. He can literally rewrite the simulation.
So Khaeos shows up, the currents completely freeze, time essentially stops. And he offers the dying parents a deal. He says he can end the uncle's life with a mere thought. Just poof, gone. Restore the throne.
And here's the twist that defines the moral center of this entire story. They refuse.
They refuse. They are dying. Their kingdom is being stolen by a traitor, and they look at a god and say, no, don't kill him. Why? Is this just extreme pacifism?
It is much deeper than pacifism.
Yeah.
It is theology. The text says they are people bound by reverence to fate.
Fate.
They believe that striking down the uncle in that manner, using an external cosmic cheat code to fix a local geopolitical problem, would unravel the destiny written in the waters. It is a profound adherence to their cultural logic. They don't ask for vengeance, they ask for mercy. Specifically, mercy for their son.
Protect him, the queen whispers. Let him live even if we cannot.
And Khaeos accepts this bargain. And this is a huge key, Khaeos is not a passive observer. He respects their wish not to outright kill the uncle, but he does not leave the uncle unpunished either. He delivers a judgment that is arguably much worse than death.
Oh, it is brutal. Khaeos extends a fragment of his will. He doesn't cut the uncle, he ignites his veins. The text literally says water burns his skin.
Think about the profound irony of that punishment. The uncle wanted to control the water so badly, he committed high treason to possess that power. Now he rules, but the very element he coveted causes him physical agony every single time he touches it.
Just a constant reminder of his failure.
Yes, he rules the throne of sorrow. It is a systemic rejection. The planet itself is now physically rejecting its ruler.
Meanwhile, Khaeos takes the baby, the prince, and vanishes into the void. He takes him beyond time's reach.
Which brings us to Act 4, the exiled heir. This is the setup for the entire future of the narrative. Evervale is left behind. It withers. The rivers recoil from the uncle. The people are secretly whispering prophecies about the child of the waters. But the prince isn't on Evervale. He is growing up in exile, hidden across the veils of existence.
But even in exile, the magic is still there. He learns to shape waves with his breath. He commands storms with a gesture. He has that aqua light in his eyes. He doesn't even know his parents, but he feels their memory in the water itself.
And this is where we really need to zoom back out to the macro level, the NeoMercy Clan universe structure. Because this isn't just a story about a lost prince coming back to claim a kingdom.
Right.
If that were the case, it would be a standard fantasy trope. But the source text explicitly states his destiny. It says he is destined to rise as one of the nine.
Wait, one of the nine, the top-tier omnipotent entities we talked about at the very start of the deep dive, the ones who basically run the whole simulation.
Yes. This tragedy, this night of blood and water, wasn't just a political coup. It was the origin story of a god. The prince isn't just a king in waiting. He is a cosmic power in the making.
So if we look at the trajectory here, we have a child born with the ultimate potential of his species. And remember, that's a level 10 aggression capability. He is saved by a cosmic entity raised entirely outside of time and destined to become an arbiter of reality.
It's a massive leap.
That is a terrifying amount of power to concentrate in one single person.
It absolutely is. And it totally recontextualizes the sacrifice of the parents. They didn't just save their baby. They preserved a being who will eventually sit at the very top of the universal hierarchy.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah, their refusal to use Khaeos as a weapon of vengeance might have been the pivotal moment that allowed the prince to eventually ascend. If they had chosen violence, perhaps the prince's destiny would have been rewritten entirely.
It implies that the suffering was strictly necessary. The engine needed this trauma to produce the final result.
Exactly. Conflict drives evolution in this framework. The uncle acted as the necessary catalyst. Without the betrayal, the prince never leaves Evervale. If he never leaves Evervale, he never meets Khaeos. If he never meets Khaeos, he never ascends to the Nine.
That is some incredibly heavy systemic logic right there. So where does that leave Evervale right now in the present timeline?
In a state of waiting and suffering. The uncle is sitting on the throne in constant pain, ruling a withering kingdom. The ecological balance is completely broken. The people are singing secret songs of rebellion. And the prince is out there somewhere in the void, getting stronger.
It is such a compelling setup. You have the emotional core, the orphan longing for his home, but it's backed by this cold, hard system of planetary rules and cosmic hierarchy.
And that is the true strength of the story engine concept. The environment of Evervale, the water, dictated the magic. The magic dictated the social hierarchy. The social hierarchy created the uncle's envy. The envy caused the conflict.
A perfect chain reaction.
And the resolution of that conflict required an intervention from the highest level of the engine, the Nine. It all fits together perfectly like clockwork.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We have walked through the mechanics of a sci-fi universe and ended up in a mythical tragedy. What are we taking away from this?
I think the key takeaway here is about the definition of power. The uncle sought power through force and unnatural technology, the crystal shard. And he ended up with a crown, but a life of sheer agony. He technically won the battle, but he lost everything that made life on Evervale actually worth living.
Right. And the parents, they had all the power in the world. They literally could have wiped the uncle from existence with a single nod, but they sacrificed that power for love. They chose the future over the present.
Exactly. They played the long game, they trusted in fate, and in doing so, they secured a destiny for their son that goes far beyond just being the king of one wet planet. They positioned him to become a universal constant.
It really makes you think about how we react to crises in our own lives, doesn't it? Do we lash out and burn everything down just to win the moment? Or do we endure, protect what really matters, and trust that the ripples we create will eventually turn into the right kind of wave?
That is a very poetic way to put it.
Well, the water metaphors are highly contagious, it seems. But before we let you go, I want to leave you with a thought that has been nagging at me since we started talking about the Valesinos earlier today.
I have a feeling I know exactly where you're going with this.
We know two things for sure based on the data. One, the Valesinos have an aggression level of 10. They are hardwired to commit genocide to protect their way of life. And two, the prince is definitely returning to reclaim his throne.
And he has been raised in exile, presumably without any of the peaceful socialization of his people, but with all of their raw, aggressive power.
Exactly. So when the Child of the Waters finally comes home, will he be the savior who heals the withering kingdom? Or, given his species' baseline nature and his own highly traumatic origin, will he be the ultimate destroyer? If his people are willing to destroy planets just to survive, what is a cosmic god willing to do to get his revenge?
It is the ultimate nature versus nurture question played out on a galactic scale. And frankly, the universe might not be ready for the answer.
Definitely something to mull over the next time you look at a river and think it looks peaceful. That is all for this deep dive into the NeoMercy Clan universe and the world of Evervale. Thanks for swimming through the currents with us today.
Until next time.
Stay curious.